Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Community Chats. My name is Anthony Saracusa, Director of Community Engagement, and I am joined, as I almost always am, by my inimitable colleagues, Dr. Jody Holland and Aaron Peiser-Oath. And we bring you Community Chats, usually twice a week. You can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Spotify. This has been modified into a podcast, so you don't even have to watch the video. You can just listen to us, and we'd like to encourage you to do that. Share it with your friends, check us out. We've been doing these interviews with folks who are making a positive difference in the LOU community for over 6 months now. We have a library on our Facebook page, on our YouTube channel, and on Spotify. So if you've missed any of our past episodes with folks from the Pantry or Doors of Hope or so many other wonderful nonprofits, the Oxford Community Market, please go back, check those out. You won't be disappointed. Community Chats is a joint initiative between the Office of Community Engagement and our friends at Loft, Lafayette Oxford Foundation for Tomorrow. And you can see all of their Night for Nonprofit participant videos on their website as well. So please go check it out. There's a ton of fabulous work being done in our community. Today, we have the distinct pleasure of having two University of Mississippi students joining us. These two students won awards in the Intercollegiate Advocacy and Dialogue competition for their project in exploration of Confederate memorialization in the Southern United States that was hosted by the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. In this competition, they won Best Letter, Best Creative Argument, and Honorable Mention in Best Use of History and Argument. We have some very impressive students with us here today, John Hydrisko and J.R. Riojas, and hopefully I got your name right, J.R. Y'all, we are so delighted to have you here today, and welcome to you both to Community Chats.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Well, let's jump right into it. We want this time to be mostly about you two, so either of you can start, but we'd love to hear from you both. Where did you grow up, and how did you end up here at the university?
So I was actually born in Oxford. My mom was here for graduate school at the time in the economics department, but I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So then when it was time for me to apply for colleges, I sort of ended up back down here, which I'm very happy about.
And yeah, my father's in the Air Force, and so I kind of moved around a bit. But in about 6th grade, we moved to South Mississippi. He was stationed at Keesler Air Force Base, and I kind of lived in Woolmarket, Mississippi, which is a little bit north of that in like Harrison County. And yeah, I ended up coming here mainly to pursue the degree in public policy leadership through the Trent Lott Leadership Institute.
That's great, guys. I'll kick it over to Jody for our next question.
Well, yeah, John, it's great meeting you. JR, I've had you in class, and I know you've been involved in the debate since you've got here. Why don't you tell the viewers about the debate union and, the style of debate competition, and try to give some information on the format.
Yeah, so we're part of the Warren Debate Union, which is the University of Mississippi debate team. It's housed in the Trent Lott Leadership Institute, and we get funding from there and from the office of the provost. And in a normal year, we travel all across the country and even across the world. We became the first college or university from the state of Mississippi to compete in the World Championship in South Africa in the 2019 World Championships. So that's all pretty exciting. But yeah, we do a few different styles, but generally we do something called British parliamentary, which is like this world style. That's what's allowed us to compete all over the world, as opposed to some other debate styles that you have 4 teams instead of just 2. And you have 2 who are in favor of the motion or resolution and 2 who are against it. And you're competing to get like first of all 4. And so someone gets first, someone gets second, someone gets third, and someone gets fourth. So like a second isn't a complete win, but it's not a complete loss. And you're competing against people who are like arguing the same things as you. So it's kind of similar to like a primary debate, I guess you could say, for like, the presidents. You're arguing for your position, but you still have to argue for it better than someone else who might agree with you, which is kind of cool. Now, what we're here talking about today is a little bit different. It's a relatively like new thing, which is the Intercollegiate Advocacy and Dialogue competition. It has a lot of like the same faces that we see in like the debate community, like Emory and Vanderbilt and Georgetown. And yeah, it's a little bit different because it also has a writing component to it. And so, yeah, we had to write a letter to the editor based on the theme, which was an exploration of Confederate memorialization in the Southern United States. And from that, the top 8 teams, the top 8 letters advanced to semifinals. And for semifinals, me and John hopped on a Zoom call and gave an oral presentation of our letter, of our proposal. From that, the top 4 got invited to an evening of dialogue. And with Carolyn Randall Williams, who wrote a wonderful op-ed in New York Times, and there they announced the winner. So it's kind of been a long process, this particular style, over the last couple of months. And John and I, as well as Ainsley Ash, helped write the letter, and then John and I presented it.
That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, very cool. We want to hear more about the letter and the competition in a few minutes, but how did y'all get involved in debate? How did you find your way into this? What drew you to this work?
So I had a friend who was from the coast who knew JR. So I met JR incidentally, and he was talking about the debate team. And I'd done some speaking competitions when I was in high school, but we don't really have that much high school debate in the Northeast. It's mostly like Ethics Bowl and Model UN and stuff. So that's how I ended up going to debate, was just running into JR.
Yeah, I also did not do debate in high school. I was really involved with mock trial and whatnot. But actually, where I met Dr. Holland, I'm not sure if he remembers, but I was a senior in high school at Emerging Leaders. And so through there, I also met Joanne Edwards, who's the director of forensics here. And so, you know, she was one of my very few connections, honestly, at this university. And so she encouraged me to come to the interest meeting for debate. I didn't think I would really pursue it. But it was just so fun. So I kind of got hooked then, and I've made it a big part of my mission at this university to try and get other people involved at all different levels of commitment.
Very cool.
That's great, y'all. I mean, Aaron sent me the letter earlier this week, and you know, I read a lot of stuff every day. And first thing I said when I saw that immediately to Aaron is, "This is phenomenal." I mean, it's very well reasoned, it's clear, and to some degree, it's poignant as well. And as I understand it, I think you all were maybe one of the only teams to place in all 3 categories: letter, creative argument, and then honorable mention in the best use of history and argument. Would you guys be able to speak to those categories a little bit? Like, how did you approach those, and how does it kind of fit into your overall schema for debate?
Yeah, before I'm going to let John talk about the writing, because honestly, all the brilliance that you see in the letter is from John. John has a way with words, and really a master of rhetoric and also of writing. So he really led the charge. So I'll let him talk about writing first, which we ended up getting first place in.
Yes. So for the letter itself, we weren't quite sure exactly what approach to take at first. This was the first of these competitions. I mean, I think they're going to keep doing it, but this was the first one. So we were a little unsure what we were supposed to write. We pretty much had a word limit, and they said like, you know, write a letter. But we also knew that they were looking for sort of historical arguments, and that they had invited schools from different states across like the American South. So we then wanted to really focus on Mississippi in particular, and sort of about the process of memorialization in Mississippi, how that sort of coincided with lost cause narratives and how they've adapted over time, and then sort of talk about some of the approaches, or an approach that could be useful in Mississippi sort of coming to like better understand itself. So that was pretty much like the focus of our letter, was, you know, walking through the history, sort of the history of ideas, and then talking about some ways that history and also that mishistory could be addressed.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I'll just add on a little bit. We ended up kind of like having to come to a conclusion of like a proposal, right, of how Mississippi ought to move forward. And so we recognize that like in the current context, right, in current events in Mississippi and all across the country, there's a lot of subtractive corrections, so to speak, that are occurring with taking down monuments, taking down the state flag. But John and I came to the conclusion that we really ought to couple these with additive corrections. As we pull down like the worst of our state, of our country, we also really want to elevate the best, and elevate the things that are often ignored in history that can unite us, and, you know, are still a real shining beacon of our state.
Thank you, guys. That's well put. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just that conversation there makes me want to ask a ton of questions regarding this. But how is debate in general, or the work on this project in particular, how has that really shaped your engagement with the community? Because this is so important.
Well, debate's kind of tricky in British parliamentary style because in any given round, you don't choose which side you're on. So you have to get pretty flexible with your ideas and what you're willing to argue, because you could be arguing against something that you believe in, or you could be arguing about something you don't really care about. So in that sense, like, debate is pretty useful for sort of teaching you skill sets and talking about like how to organize your arguments, how to make them felt to people. But at the same time, it is actually kind of different and almost foreign when you're then trying to use that skill set to argue for your actual position and for your actual beliefs. That can kind of throw you off when all of a sudden you're doing something that you've been doing in a pretty abstract way, for points in a tournament or whatever. When you're trying to do that for something you actually believe in, it can actually be a little like disconcerting in my experience. But the organization, sort of the efficiency of argument, the economy of argument that we practice a lot in debate, when you only have 15 minutes of preparation and 7 minutes of actual speaking time, that kind of comes through when you only have 700 words to work with. So that was one thing that I was really using for debate, was like that economy of argument and of language.
Yeah, and our union has had a real opportunity to engage with the community over the years, and about like I'll just give like 3 quickish examples. So like the first one, I would say in the direct context of this competition, this dialogue competition, we had to do a lot of like local historical analysis, and so just learning about the history of like Lamar and Molly Barr and the intersection of that, really you engaged with not just the present community, but also like the past community and how we got there. So that was interesting. On kind of a yearly basis, we always have public debates. And so you're always welcome we invite the whole community. We try and really target high school and middle schoolers to try and encourage them to come. And we've had, varying attendance depending on the topic. We announce a topic, like a broad kind of topic, like education, so that way the debaters still don't really know what they're debating. And then we put on a debate. And so we try and engage them in conversation. And it's the general public who actually decides the winner of that debate, because the goal of British parliamentary is for the average informed voter. So, someone who reads the news, isn't going to be completely clueless, but also might not know debate lingo, can come to a decision. So, we try and foster communication there. But then also uniquely at the beginning of this year, kind of instead of doing a singular public debate, we hosted the Sunflower Charity Invitational. So we raised money for the Sunflower County Freedom Project in August, and that was really special. So we invited some of our really close friends in the debate community from Morehouse College, from Vanderbilt, from Miami, and from Laverne, a school in California. And so they all came, and we had a round robin competition. And it was a very unique style, because like a unique tournament setup. It was still British parliamentary, but generally it's not that. And so we broadcast that to the public, and we ended up getting over $3,000 in donation from the public. So it was just an all-day kind of event, and we had donors from all over. Specifically, Laverne just had a great effort to help out a community organization, that really does give back and gives to the future of Mississippi.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that is so cool. So exciting to hear about that, and to support such a good cause with the Sunflower Freedom Project too. So both of you alluded to this a little bit in terms of what you found helpful in debate. And I was just reading an article the other day that said, we need to argue more, not less, but we need better arguments. And so what would you say, what have you learned from this that you think can help us as community members learn how to tackle complex issues together?
Well, I think something that's important, it's actually something that you kind of get scored on in a debate round. But also, I think it's just like generally good for discussion, is that if you're arguing against someone or arguing with someone, you want to like take them at sort of their best, like take their best case, take it, take it at its best and engage with that as opposed to sort of straw manning it or dodging it, which is something that I think, kind of like we could all work on. I think that that's generally a good reflex to have. People might disagree with that, but like generally you want to take your opponent at their best, because that'll make your own argument, much better than it would be otherwise. So I think that's something that is important to think about.
Yeah, and kind of going off of that, it's kind of like a debate term called like a weighing mechanism, for like why is your team going to win, right? Why should the voters vote for you? And so having like equivalent like weighing mechanisms with the people who you're conversing with, agreeing like what the goal is. So for instance, in the general debate about healthcare, so often it becomes about insurance good or bad, as opposed to the conversation being about health. Like there are ways to promote health of our society that don't involve insurance, that just promoting education and things such as that. So I think realizing where our goals are similar is really important, and that occurs in debate. Because as John was saying, if you can take the goal of your opponent and show why your proposal gets there better than them, I think that's a very valuable conversation to have. And also it's like very self-reflective. Like, and I have changed my positions on many issues, from having to sometimes defend what I believe. Like sometimes it's easier to defend what I don't believe than what I just so intrinsically believe, because I'm like, wait a minute, no, I actually don't have enough reasons for this. So it's kind of like a good self-check. And then sometimes I go do research and I'm like, oh no, I was right. But the other times I'm like, man, I really was wrong. So yeah, really good practices there.
Thanks, y'all. What a cool project, and what a wonderful thing for y'all to be involved in as students, but to be able to make that publicly accessible through the event you did with Sunflower, and to be able to think about the relevance of this for public discourse. I mean, that's just super cool. So for those folks who may not be familiar with the specifics of your group and the work that you're doing, or just debate in general, how might folks learn more about the work y'all are doing? Or if they just want to learn more about debate, what resources would you point them to learn more?
Yeah, so we have we're trying this year, kind of what has been a weird season with having all the tournaments online. We've been trying to build more of a online presence. So you can find the University of Mississippi Debate Team and Warren Debate Union on Facebook and Twitter, where we try and advertise our efforts. We also generally host like a high school debate tournament. And so getting involved in high school, you can go to the NSDA website, the National Speech and Debate Association, if you're a high schooler. If you're in college, Google your college or university and do debate or forensics, and you'll be able to kind of like find out what's there. And if you're an adult, we would love for you to reach out via our Facebook page, and I'll send y'all a link at the end of this, so maybe y'all can include it in the broadcast. But we're always looking for like volunteer judges to help and provide new perspectives, because sometimes it's just John and I talking back and forth with the same 10 debaters on the debate team, and so it becomes kind of circular. So we're always looking for volunteers and a fresh perspective. Hopefully that kind of answers what you were looking for.
That's perfect. Thanks, guys.
That is great. I know we're starting to wrap this up a little bit, but we call this the 1 minute moment. If you guys had just 1 minute to speak to students or people in the LIU community, what would you tell them about these projects you're working on?
Well, I think that something important to think about within the context of Mississippi is that when we talk about like sort of the history of Mississippi, there's obviously a lot of very bad stuff there. When we talk about the present of Mississippi, there's a lot of bad stuff. There are a lot of things that either aren't working well or are working perfectly to bad ends. But at the same time, what we want to say is that, a lot of the glorification of those things, the glorification of Confederacy, of like Jim Crow Mississippi, and that legacy, one of the harms of that, other than the very obvious and very real harms that has on people within our community, is that it also is this belittling lie that like the best thing to ever come out of Mississippi was slavery, secession, the Civil War, Jim Crow, segregation. And we think that, part of the problem with that idea is that it causes people to really, sort of sleep on and ignore some of the wonderful things that have come out of Mississippi, some of the people who have, endured under those conditions and created art under those conditions and, built communities under those conditions and worked to like make this state a better place for people. So that's one thing we want the people to be thinking about is, yes, you absolutely have to be engaging with the worst aspects of your local history. But at the same time, it could be good to, do some digging and find, who in your local history or your local community in the present moment has really contributed in some amazing ways that we think go underappreciated.
And no matter who you are, we want you to know that you have a voice, you have a platform, and we would like to ask you to use that platform to be empathetic and to not be willfully ignorant. There are always going to be things that we don't know. But when you choose to not engage with them, whether it's your own history or the history of your locality or current events, that's when the current harms in society progress and continue to harm people. So be willing to engage with that and do so with empathy and forgiveness and virtues such as that in mind.
Wow, JR and John, what a wonderful testament to the character and integrity of our students at the University of Mississippi, of taking seriously public issues, of thinking about ways to engage ethically and effectively with often difficult parts of our past, and then explicating what that means for the present in our community today. I just want to thank you both on behalf of our office and for all of the wonderful work that you've done in this area, for highlighting some critical issues, and honestly, for giving us a way of thinking about issues that seem just to have one side or the other, to think about those in both of those ways, right? Or in manifold different ways. As a historian, I was taught to do that, right? In your history essays, you want to argue both sides, but then make the case for what you think, right, could be the most compelling argument. And so I think you all model that, and that's such a critical element of our public discourse that sometimes seems, at least in this moment, to be lost. So thank you both for this critical work and for all that you have done in our community. You all have a bright future, and I can't wait to watch it. So thank you for being on Community Chats today.
Thanks. It was great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And to all of our viewers and listeners, per usual, please like this video or podcast, comment on it, share it with your friends. Please help get the word out about the wonderful work that folks are doing in our debate union here at the University of Mississippi. In the meantime, stay safe, stay engaged, and we'll see you next time on Community Chats.